All right. Hello, ladies and gents. I figured I would take a moment to go over what the AP exam actually is about and what it looks like. I realize some of you haven't seen what the new exam is, and it would be helpful for everyone if we just go over it in a video so you can look back and stuff like that. Okay. So I'm going to be looking at the screen, so it's not going to be looking like I'm looking at you, but I'm here. All right, AP exam. There are 3 different portfolios for AP Studio Art. You can take the drawing portfolio, you can take the 2D portfolio, or you can take 3D. The differences between these are drawing is focusing on the elements and principles of drawing. So elements and principles tab of drawing specifically. So how well to use line, how many different materials are you drawing in? So is it pen based? Is this illustration? Is this the painting? It's really kind of focusing on the traditional forms of art. So mark making, and how much of a variance can you make with your marks, and how much skill do you have in those making of marks. 2D, you get a little bit more conceptual, right? You can go in and you can start off with photographs. You can do digital art. You can do drawing on a tablet, I believe, could be either drawing or 2D, so that could be somewhat transversal. But this could be photography. This could be digital art, graphic design, typography, things like that. And then we have 3D, which is sculpture and ceramics and installation and all of that jazz. Now, these are also not super rigid exams. They can be somewhat fluid. So let's say you are doing a 2D portfolio where you're taking these portraits of people, but then you're bringing drawing into it, right? You're drawing on the portraits and you're going off and you're highlighting specific things that you feel like need to be highlighted. You're blacking out things for a specific reason, or you're really working in the multimedia effect, right? Then you're starting to transition into maybe even 3D, but depending on how much media you're adding, right? Are you taking these portraits and making cubes? So you can start off with one portfolio and sort of blend or bleed a little bit into another. And the portfolio that you select for your final submission should be focused specifically on one of these 3 topics. Okay, so once you've decided what portfolio you want, as a student, actually, I did 2 of them. I did drawing and 2D when taking the AP exam myself. So let's say I was taking the drawing exam again. What 2 categories are within that exam are the sustained investigation, which is the big one, and that's 15 images that are based off of one idea, or thought, also known as a concentration. So you have one specific idea. Yeah, let's say you are talking about, you don't want it to be too broad or too general, because then it's hard to really dive in and focus on one thing. So if I'm giving an example from, let's say last year, there was a girl, her name is Mia. She was doing a photography concentration, so we'll switch to 2D, a photography concentration of herself in the 1980s. So she was taking photographs and she was getting all dressed up and she was finding images and places and things that really pushed her back in time to the 80s. And what she was left with was a concentration or collection of 15 images that were all her and herself in the 80s. So she went and she dressed up in 80s clothing and went to a diner, and she was, drinking a milkshake, and she had a jukebox next to her, and she was changing the tints and the tones, and the way that the pictures were cropped was very 1980s-esque. But all of the pictures made sense together because they were all based off of one idea. So even if I were to not have any kind of written information about what was going on, by seeing all these pictures together, I would have somewhat of an understanding of where she started with her idea, where she finished, and what the idea was about, because all the pictures relate to one another. Okay, so with your sustained investigation, you have a written component. Yes, and this is basically you're letting the judge, the person who's grading your work, know what your idea was, what your intention was, what it's about. So you talk about your intention. Yeah, if I was Mia, I'd be talking, I wanted to put myself in the 1980s because, the 1980s were important to me, blah, 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 blah. By doing this, I played with framing, I played with composition, I played with textural elements, I played with clothing, design. I did research and I brought that research into here. I was inspired by this artist, by that artist. You're letting the judge know exactly what's going on up in that noggin when you're creating this body of work. And honestly, the written component is very, very important. It's almost as important as the work itself, because that's what they're focusing on a lot this year is your ideas behind your work, because they're trying to build artistic thought as well as artistic creation, which I'm all for, and I think that's a great idea. Okay, so the next section is called your once you have the sustained investigation, you have your selected works. And these are 5 images. And these are your best pieces ever. They are the top 5 pieces that you've ever made in your whole life. You're going to bring in here. Now, these 5 works can be from your sustained investigation. So let's say you have one portrait of a chair, and this portrait of the chair doesn't really match your sustained investigation, which is yourself in the 1980s. But you really, really want to include this chair because it was just the best thing you've ever made. You can have 4 images from your sustained investigation and then that image of the chair. These don't have to correlate or correspond in any way. These 5 images are just the best. That's the only thing that's tying these together. So let's say it's the image of a chair. You say you're doing a graphic design of a restaurant menu. Let's say you're doing a photograph, another photograph, and then a photograph where you drew on it, something like that. A collection of the best ideas to show your range, to show what you can do. This is your pow, show off kind of phase. But these selected works should really exemplify, again, coming up here, whatever portfolio you made. So if you are doing a drawing portfolio, you're probably not going to have a ceramic piece of a pinch pot in your selected works, right? Because that doesn't add anything to the idea of drawing portfolio. And when they're looking at 4 drawings, they're looking for all of these things. It should be very, very present in your selected works. And then with your selected works is also a written component, where same thing, you're giving materials, and you're giving your ideas, thoughts, and intention. Okay, so we're going to be going over all of this throughout the year, for sure. Each project is going to be talking about, what elements and principles are you using? What can you add to it to make it better? As an artist, how would you classify your work, right? Write your own artist statement and give me intention, give me thoughts, give me ideas. How can we finesse that to be the best written representation of your work? And how can we make it very communicable to someone else who's viewing your work? Okay, so that's honestly the whole exam. You have 20 pictures, and 5 of those pictures can be from your sustained investigation. So let's say you were to pull all 5 from that, you're really only making 15 pieces of art. But these 15 pieces of art have to be really well done. All right, so that's all for me. Let me know if you have any questions, and that's all.